How's everyone doing? Love the energy, love the energy. My name is Kelly. I'm a product designer here at Figma, and I'm so hyped to be joined with Giorgio and Miggi to be talking about designing in the second dimension. So let's get started. Awesome. So after our big reveal at yesterday's keynote, it might not come to a great surprise that we'll be doing a lot of this with grid layout today. But before we dive into the details of our new feature, I want to start by talking a little bit about why we care about layout here at Figma and some of our thought processes at Grid. So whether you notice them or not, grids are actually a huge part about the way we design, whether it's the digital or the physical or the everyday worlds. The columns in a poster have grids, the invisible scaffoldings of magazines, or maybe even this coffee table book that I'm sure I've seen on some of your living room tables, but have you ever read it before? I don't know. I see some of you chuckling. When you think of a grid, you might even think of a spreadsheet in Excel. Or maybe our favorite track star, Mario. He's also built on a grid. Or maybe even the blueprints of our beloved transit maps. Maybe you saw one earlier today on the Muni. Point is, grid layouts are kind of like the quiet, unassuming backbones behind what makes some of our favorite designs so iconic and balanced. Even when the layout is simply represented as lines on a page or static columns and pillars, they can give us structure and a visual guide. But they can also give us freedom. You can align each item perfectly, or you can bend the rules just enough so that everything still looks balanced, right, and dynamic. At the surface, a grid might seem a little bit intimidating. You see all these corners and squares and sharp lines, but utilizing a grid doesn't always necessitate following the rules. It's okay to go a little bit rogue, as you can see in these examples. Color outside the lines a bit, have some empty squares, or even just stray away from it. I like to describe layout as sort of like the beams in a house. You don't always see them, but you know that they're there, giving you that structure. If they're not there, your house would literally just collapse. So for a long time in digital design tooling, we've been trying to recreate this similar type of structure, but interactively. And what makes this so challenging is that supporting structure in systems is really important with the idea of having a flexible system as well, which makes processes more efficient and allows you to get straight into your layout and work with your designers. So striking the right balance between structure and flexibility is key. It's not just about having structure, it's also about how easily that structure can be shaped. And when that balance is right, these invisible layout tools that we all know and love can feel both effortless and powerful. Now, speaking of invisible layout tools, I'm sure a lot of you know and love auto layout, or should I say, auto layout, big pals forever. Anyways, I'm sure many of you in the room have a deep love for auto layout, or maybe you have a love-hate relationship with it. Let's dive deeper into that a little bit. So for a lot of designs, auto layout just feels right. The elements snap into place. There's that satisfying feeling of pressing Shift-A on your keyboard, or maybe even when your button just hugs the text and you can almost feel it giving you a nice little cozy hug. It evokes this satisfying feeling where we're tempted to apply auto layout to literally everything. I'm sure some of you in the room know that one designer who literally only lives in auto layout and applies it to every single frame. Can I see some hands? Yeah? I see a lot of hands. Well, auto layout is awesome because it adapts to our design's content and removes the need for us to define any structure beforehand. As our designs start to grow in complexity, we can continue to use it, and it grows with us. You can continue to nest and nest and nest containers until you reach a point where suddenly you're stuck thinking about which horizontal or vertical stack that you need to wrap in which order. You end up building containers for your containers just for more containers to merge, just to keep things structured. Just look at how long this layer tree has gotten, and if we take a closer look, we can see that more than half of these are just containers for auto layout, and the indentation level is kind of wild too. And this isn't even considering the designers that seem to apply auto layout almost excessively. I mean, just raise your hands if you've seen a layers panel that looked like this, or even worse. I'm sure a lot of you even work in these structures all day. For me, this can evoke some anxiety, but But at the same time, it can also feel like a symbol of pride. Like, I worked so hard to define the structure, and now I can just sit back and relax, like all my work here is done. Oh, spoke too soon. In comes that one change that absolutely destroys my layout. I'm sure you all have been here before, where you need to select that one instance inside of your container, and you just click, click, click until suddenly your horizontal layout becomes your vertical layout, and everything is broken. And we've seen your pain across the community. Auto layout can feel like such a personal battle and journey sometimes, where it's not only hard to figure out the right balance and right sequence for creating layouts in more than one dimension, but it's also hard to engage in others' work sometimes. And this can lead to some awkward collaboration where you enter someone's file and you just can't seem to understand how they did their auto layout because every designer has a different way of approaching it. It's almost like we've become our own micromanagers of layout, just to make a design feel responsive or code ready. And don't even get me started on how much of a struggle this would be for a developer and engineer, just flex boxes, flex boxes, flex boxes. Which brings us back to this balance between structure and flexibility. As designs start to scale in structure, they can feel more delicate to touch or mess around with. But as designers, isn't that our job? We're always messing around with things, we're always breaking things and trying all sorts of wild designs. And so the balance here is really important to strike in any invisible layout tool. A lot of this limitation is a side effect of auto layout only being built for layouts in the one dimension. It creates this problem of flip-flopping between the vertical and the horizontal and back to the vertical, but why not have both? The reality is designers design in 2 dimensions, and when we rely on the one dimension to create, it can become so much about these self-determined rules, which takes away from our creative intent as designers and introduces more friction. So instead of working so hard to define the structure in the one dimension at a time, we wanted to finally bring the next evolution of auto layout to Figma with a system that gives you both that structure, but also flexibility. And so today, we are so freaking excited to introduce grid layout as a new option to auto layout, which gives you that perfect balance between structure and flexibility. I know you guys have been waiting a really long time in the community for a grid system to hit Figma, so without further ado, let's dive deeper into the demo with Giorgio.
Woo! Thank you, Kelly. Awesome. Hi, everybody. Let's take a look at how grid works, shall we? And let's start with the basics. So just a reminder, grid is a new auto layout option, so it can be found on the same level of layout, vertical, horizontal, and I can enable clicking here. And if I do that, the first thing I usually want to do is change the size of grid. Again, you can do this with this new component, but today I also want to show you that you can type in, of course, especially useful for larger grids. And OK, I have my grid. Again, I can change the padding here and on the canvas. Let's do 20. OK, awesome. Now that I have my grid, I want to drag item inside. And I can drag and drop, anywhere. Let's put it here. And by default, each row and column will occupy the available space. So that means, in other words, that they're all equally sized. Now, I want to show you another way to add items, which is if I copy this one here, I can click on any cell and paste it. OK. Now, I have 4 remaining cells, but I need to add 5, actually, items here. So let's see what happens if I drag them here. Well, we automatically add new rows when needed. OK, now that I have my elements inside, why don't we take a look at resizing elements and their relationship with the cells? So here, I can, of course, having items that fills the all cells. And let me show you what that means. You can see here, that means that they are responsive by default. But let's take an item and see what happens if I resize it. So of course, I can have items smaller than a cell. And as you can see, by default, we resize on the top left. But you can change that anytime. And as you can see, the handles update to help you understand where the item is anchored to. OK. But I can do also the opposite, and meaning I can make items larger than cells, so like in this case. And I mean, you can just tell I'm not an artist here, but let me try to create a collage. And again, I can move items also on the third dimension, so moving them up and down. This is very, very handy to have more control on, let's say, the 3D aspect of your layout. OK, awesome. Let's move on now with another example where I want to show you that you can also create grids in a different way, which is if you have already items on the canvas, you can select them, pressing the beloved Shift-A, and now items are already in a grid. OK, but if we take a look at these cards, we notice that there are, the colors are all over the place. Let's try to make some order here, and I can take and drag items. And in this first iteration of grid, our recommendation is to move items from downstream to upstream. And this is because grid have a sort of automatic flow, which is, again, from top left to bottom right. And you want to be mindful of that. Maybe we hope in the future also to add flexibility to this, but keep this in mind for now. OK, cool. I have now all my colors. Now, a nice functionality of grid is that we can also move items and maintain the relative position. So in this case, I can take the all color, and as you can see, the all yellow will move. And I can do the same, of course, for rows. OK. Now, let's move on. You might remember this from Kelly's intro, our beloved Mario. I'm Italian, I know, but that doesn't matter. Let's press Shift-A just to show you that, of course, you can easily add grid here. And you can also maintain gaps, which is something that it's pretty hard with the current or other auto layout options. Now, similar here, I want to show you, you can see that how grid is great to create pixel art, but what if I really, so you have two grid here, but what if I really love jalapenos and I want to take this and put in here? So this is a grid-to-grid movement, and as you can see, we maintain that. OK, these were kind of the basic action you can take with grid. For a more advanced one, back to you, Kelly, again.
Thank you. Awesome. OK, so thanks, Giorgio, for walking us through some of the basic functionalities of grid. Now I want to take it a little bit up a notch and show you guys how we can be a little bit more flexible with the default structure and items arranged in grid. So let's look at this layout over here. This is a little bit more of a complex layout, and I built it with auto layout. As you can see, if I just click through, I see all these crazy containers again. I have this vertical stack here. I have this container. Everything is just, lots of nesting, like I mentioned. And if I wanted to change this to be a little bit smaller, I don't want that to happen. So let's take a look at how I would build this with grid. So I've set up some of the bare bones here, and right off the bat, you can notice this gaping hole between the nav bar and the header. And I kind of want to get rid of this. The reason why it's happening is because by default, we set all tracks to auto, as we can see in these labels, which gives us a very easy ability to fill items automatically, and it divides the space of our container nicely so that things are responsive by default. But sometimes I want my track to hug the item or just maintain a fixed size. So if I want to do this, I can look over here to the dot in the corner, which gives me access to that auto layout. Simply click on it and add a manual input, which allows me to resize that track. I can also use dragging to quickly snap, and that feels really nice. Shout out to Isha for all of the interactions you tell on this, my engineer. And I can do the same thing with this header over here, very easy, snap. And now let's take a look at the images. So over here, we have uniform images arranged in 1 by 1 cells. But I really like this image, so I want it to be a little bit bigger, and I want it to look a little bit more like that auto layout example that I just showed you. So what if I drag this over here and try to set some span? So by default, items in a grid will be arranged in a 1 by 1 cell, and they automatically fit. But we can easily just drag to the next available cell, and you can see that the span counter updates. This removes the ability for us to have to go into the properties panel, manually set things to like numbers, and just allows us to directly manipulate on the canvas, making it a lot easier to arrange things and be more flexible with your content. So I'm going to do the rest with these images. Snap. Oops, snap. This one's going to go here. I like that one. I really like this one. Look at us doing snow angels over there. Snap, snap, and that's really satisfying. So now we have our grid layout. And if we go and resize this container, we can see that everything flows as expected, even horizontally, even vertically, and we can see that our nav bar has stayed in place as well, which is pretty cool. And if only I could just demo how long it would take for me to build this. It would take up the rest of the demo. Anyways, so now I want to segue over into a question that maybe some of you have been thinking, which is, what is it like designing something like Grid? And so I wanted to give a little bit of a behind the scenes of something like track resizing and how refining the interaction details for a feature like this was a great process between me and Giorgio. So as you can see in the track resizing functionality, there are a lot of this is auto layout, sorry. There are a lot of micro interactions to consider, such as what happens when I try to resize padding. Usually in auto layout, you see the padding control in canvas as well as gaps, but for track resizing, the edges sort of interfere, and suddenly we are remained with very little hit target to differentiate what you're trying to do. Do you want to edit a gap? Do you want to resize a track? A lot of these micro interactions became very clear to us during the process that we needed to think about how the system fit together as a whole, instead of just simple features in isolation. And so as I was designing track resizing, I craved for a way to see all of these interactions fit together in one system and see how, things like the labels, do they feel obstructive? Things like the hit targets, how does that feel and work when I'm designing? And so I was very lucky, and I had Giorgio over here, who's like the king of prototyping, and I was able to explore prototyping, track resizing, as well as a lot of grid prototypes with code. So let me just show you over here. This is my kind of playground for track resizing, where we have a bunch of versions for tracking different later versions of Grid, as well as track resizing, to see which versions kind of felt the best. And so I started by tracking these versions, and I wanted to show you one of the earlier versions. So with V2, this is one of the challenges that we faced when looking into gaps. These are the gap handles that we all know and love in auto layout, and they kind of get in the way a bit, especially because we have multiple rows, multiple columns. It's not just that one line anymore. It's like these big 3 rectangles of pink gap. And maybe I don't need to identify gaps in my grid all the time. And so this quickly became clear to us throughout this prototype that maybe we should disable this on Canvas instead and just rely on the properties panel, because gaps seem to be more of an explicit property instead. Another consideration we made was having track resizing available as soon as you hover over a line. But this can feel unexpected because the hit target is really small, meaning that you might be going over to select your item and accidentally hit the track. And so this was another thing that we had to really feel out with a prototype, which was really awesome to do in these scenarios. So that's just a quick glimpse of how we've designed such a tool in an invisible format. And now I want to give Giorgio a chance to show off his prototype. So let me show you. Can I show the audience?
Go ahead. Thank you. One thing also, when using CSS, HTML prototyping, especially for Grid, that was very helpful, is that actually 2 things. The first one is that, first of all, we didn't have to create a layout engine that, as our engineering team knows very well, is not so easy. And the second one is that also we really care about Grid layout to be compatible with CSS. So directly using CSS to prototype also helped us to check that everything was compatible. That's very nice, Kelly. OK, now to show you a little bit more how you can use Grid within your flow, I pass it to Miggi.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Giorgio. So I'm an unofficial member of the Grid team, and as such, I've got to play with Grid over the past few weeks, months. It's been a total blast. And what I'm going to show you today is how to effectively work with Grid with the things that you already know. So this is workflow tips in Figma. Let's go. Oh, yeah. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a pricing table with Grid. We're going to talk about nesting frame constraints, resizing, auto layout, and multi-edit. So here I have a grid already set up on my canvas just to save a little bit of time. When I click on this, you can see over here in the right that it is a 5x6 grid. We have no gaps currently set up. Now, I was challenged by one of our team members. They were just like, Miggi, you just got to make a table up there, right? That's what people want to see. Tables are going to be not perfect in Grid yet, but there's a lot that you can do to make these really nice. I'm going to begin. I have a few components here. You can see that I have this auto layout component. It's basically a fixed component that has fill container text inside. I'm going to go ahead, drop that over there. And then I'm going to press Command-D to duplicate across those frames. You'll notice down here it says replace content. Basically, it's going to identify that. It wants to replace it. So it sees that I have some starter plans. So it's going to go ahead and let's see what it chooses. So we have Pro, Business, Enterprise, Ultimate. Ooh, I like that Ultimate plan. I'm going to select that, delete that there. Now, I'm going to begin with the features. I'm going to drag this over onto the left-hand side. And what's cool about this is I put a border bottom on this component, and that's going to serve as our line across the table. Over here, I have another object. This is just a frame, and I want to show you how frames are going to nest in grids. So cells in grids are just kind of like placeholders. When you drop a frame into a cell, it occupies that cell, and then you can put things inside of that frame and have some good control with it. And I'm going to show you how to use that. I'm going to option drag that over here, hit Command-D, D a couple times, and you can see we have this row set up. I'm going to click right here, drag all the way over, and let's move down. I'm going to hold down the Option key. It's going to drag down our grid rows. Now, oh, one more time. I think I got an extra thing in there. That's fine. I'm going to select that. Boom. So we have our table layout set. Once again, these are just frames. Now, this other item that I have over here, you can see I have a variant component set, and this is going to let us know in our pricing table, right, what we have. So actually, we need some features first. I'm going to select those. It didn't ask me to replace the content, but that's OK. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type in replace content. Once again, it's going to use that AI, but it's going to ask me this time, like, what do I want? So I want some feature names, right? I'm a great prompter. Let's see what comes out. Here we go. So I got grid feature, list view enhancement, sorting capability. That's fantastic. I'm going to grab this instance. I'm going to copy it. Now, watch as I drag these frames, right? I have them all selected, and I'm just going to paste. And it multi-edit pastes into all of those frames. How cool is that? But rotate them around a little bit, right? They're doing a little dance for you. So they're all placed inside of there. So what's great about that, I know with multi-edit, many of you were complaining, like, within a frame, you have other frames inside that frame. It's not finding them. Multi-edit works inside a grid. So I just want to highlight that there for you. Now, for this moment, I'm going to select that whole grid. I'm going to drag this to the left. You're going to see that things aren't quite aligning the way that we want them to align. So I'm going to select all of those cells, and I'm going to press return. When I press return on those cells, it's selecting children. It's nothing new. That's how it works in Figma. But that's going to be your best friend when working here, when working with those nested items. I'm going to press enter. It selects those children. And I'm going to hold down Shift and align them all to center. So they're all being aligned within those cells. Now, when I select my pricing table and I drag this left and right, you can see that everything aligns the way we want. I can go top to bottom, left to right. Let's say we want to do that track sizing bit. Kelly, you were working on that. That was, a nice little prototype. I can drag this over, and you'll see that fixed value shows up right there. Now, let's say I want to move on to other tracks and adjust them as well. I could press the Tab key, and it goes up and down. There we go. I'm just going there. right? And I could just press enter, and I could change this value just right there on the keyboard. Press 280. Let's press enter again, change that to 320, and I could stay within my flow. Isn't that pretty cool? I like that. Oh, hold on. One more thing. One more thing. I can hold the command key when I drag. It's going to select all of those components there. Let's say these features are not available in the Pro plan. Let's turn that off. Come over here, hold the command key right there. Boom, using those variants. How sweet is that? It's almost like fun. All right, so the way that those constraints are working when I select this frame, this object, the way that it works, when I resize the frame, it's going to resize according to the constraints that it's given. When I select that nested item, you'll see that it currently has center constraints. When I click bottom and right, that means it's going to follow the bottom and the right. Now, constraints also just work when you align it within the panel. So if I click down alignment and right alignment, it's going to set those constraints for you. So those constraints are going to be your friends when you want to determine how objects move within a frame, within a grid. Now, one thing about grid is that we're primarily thinking that that grid, the padding around it, and the cell gaps are determining the cell sizes unless you're using track sizing, right? So grid is in beta, it's gonna continue to improve, but you may be working and you pixel perfectionists out there might wanna have more control over your cell sizes, or you wanna know what your cell sizes are currently. So I'm gonna show you a little tip that I came up with on Monday as I was thinking up what I was gonna talk about today. I'm gonna draw a little frame here, I'm gonna copy it. Once again, I'm gonna select this cell, I'm gonna paste this in. Let's snap that in there. I'm gonna press Command D, 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 D. Right, that's just to help me visualize this frame so you can see kind of like how it moves around. Now, when I press Shift M, it's gonna pull up measurement mode in design mode. This is relatively new, and you'll see I could drag those points there, right? And I could drag those points there. And now, when I press Escape, I'm in this mode, and I can see it live update. So if I want that to be exactly like 104, boom, right there. I have visibility as I'm working. Once again, you want to show height annotations, that's Shift Y. You want to pull up the measurement tool, it's Shift M. When you're in that measurement tool, to exit it, just press Escape, and it's going to save you so much time. So once again, look at that. You just have the visibility into your design. And if you want to annotate it for your developers, you can even say 1FR, type that in, and that is fantastic. All right, so one great thing is that it works with slides. I'm going to head on over here. I'm going to show you a slides example. Here I am in a slide. I'm going to press the F key. I'm going to drag this frame. Let's go into design mode. I'm going to set that frame fill as black. This way, when I show up the little grid cells, y'all in the back can see it a little bit better. I'm going to select this frame. I'm going to turn on the grid. I'm going to type in my values. I'm going to do 12 by 6. I'm going to set my gap values as 24 by 24. I'm going to command click on the padding. That affects all the padding. Command click, control click if you're on Windows. I'm going to type in, oh, I did 24. I want to do 48. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a bento box template for myself. I'm going to press the R key. I'm going to drag that here. I'm going to make a 6 by 6. Now watch this. Command duplicate. Let's have it. Command duplicate. Let's have it. Let's duplicate. Let's go 1/3 by 1/3, and then Command D, 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 D. Now, if I want to, once again, I could press return. It selects all of the objects in there. I can break that, and I can actually make this image templates, right? So if you want to make that an image template, and then you want to place those images, right? The shortcut key for that is Command-Shift-K. So when I press Command-Shift-K, then what it does is it brings up that file browser. I can select these images. I can press return, and that's going to charge it up on my cursor so I can click on every single one of those, and I have an adorable arrangement of animals. All right, so it also works with dev mode and Figma sites. So when you select the container, you will see display grid. You'll see your template row columns. When you click on the child, you will see display. Well, this is flex display. And then we're going to have align self-stretch. We have grid row span 3, grid column span 1. So it's going to provide that visibility. But at this point, right, we have sites. We can make it for ourselves. So I'm going to head on over to sites. So you can see here I've already set up a desktop, tablet, and mobile. I'm going to click on these. I'm going to choose the grid right on the frames themselves. Once again, I'm going to do a 12 by 10 grid setup. Now, I'm going to click on the tablet. Let's say I click there. I'm just going to press 8. I'm going to click on the phone. I'm going to press 4. So we set up those layouts as being different. When I click on desktop, I'm going to change my gap to 16. Then we got 16. And I'm going to add my padding, command-click 48. So we have our grids set up. I'm going to go ahead and drop in gallery. When I drop it in that first one, you can see it applied to everything. Let's say I want to do a bit of track resizing, right? I can adjust the track resizing on each sort of cascade down. I'm going to take one of these images. I'm going to drop it in there. And now I'm going to multi-edit those images, and you'll see that when I snap it, I got 3 by 2, I got 4 by 2. You can kind of see what's happening in the other galleries. Let's say I just want to adjust this one. I'm going to move that on up. Now, I'm going to multi-edit, select those, and then Command D, 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 right? And then I can actually preview this, but let's actually do some swap outs. So you can see I can actually make some changes in the images. I'm going to choose an image 3 here, image 4, and let's do variant 5. There we go. Hit play, and we can preview how that works. All right, so just so y'all know, Grid is currently in beta, and we would absolutely love your feedback. We want you to dig in there. We want you to use Grid to its fullest capabilities, knowing there's going to be more. When you click on that little question mark down at the bottom, you can choose and submit feedback. You can download the Grid Playground file on Community. It was lovingly made by our advocacy team here at Figma. You can find it at figma.com/@Figma. Also, big shout outs to Team Grid, Kelly, Giorgio, Ida, everybody who has been working on this project. We absolutely stand the span. Now, I have one fun little bit here to show you. I made a prototype using Grid. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go into prototype mode. You can see I made some interactive components here. I'm going to go ahead and hit play me. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and hit play me. Going to play. All right, there we go. You can do it. Internet Wi-Fi, please work. There it is. Yes, thank you. Thank you all for coming today.
Grid.
This was made using only the gap resizing adjustments. So please go out there, play, do things that we wouldn't even inspect. Have a wonderful config.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.